Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're going to be going over layers, sublayers, and how to keep your paths organized within them. We'll also cover how to name everything and how to arrange the different layers, sublayers, and your paths just to keep everything organized. Alright, let's get started. To pull up your layers panel, you want to use the shortcut key F7. That, or you can come up to Window and click Layers. That's going to bring up the layers panel here. So I'm going to start with some existing layers just so you can get an idea, and then I'll show you how to create new ones. So right here we have the girl layer, and she's in this layer, and we also have our background layer. Now to select the layer, and it'll select everything within it, you can come over here and click that little button there. That's going to select everything within the layer. And you can do it for the other one as well. To turn off and on your layer's visibility, you click the little eyeball here on the left. And to lock a layer, so if I want to work on the girl layer here and I keep selecting my background, I'll just undo that. You can click in this little box here and it's going to lock everything in that layer. To expand and see what's within the layer, you click this little arrow right here. So this will reveal everything that's within the girl layer. So now what we have here are sublayers. So all of these sublayers are within the layer. So we have the left arm, legs, etc. And you can also select those by clicking the side icon as well. And it'll just select everything within that sublayer. Now your sublayer is going to contain all of your paths that you create. So for instance, the left arm, we have the upper shadow, which is this little piece here. We have the forearm shadow, and we have the main arm, and you can select the individual pieces like that. So these are the different paths that you create. This is the sublayer, and this is the layer. So you want to make sure you use your layers for the main objects in your scene. Like we have for the girl, you don't want to make a layer for her head, a layer for her torso, etc. Because then if you want to select the girl all at once, you'd have to go through and select each of those layers. Whereas this way, you can just select the entire layer at once. So for instance, if we want to make a house in the background, we would make a new layer, build the house all in that layer, and then we'd have different sublayers, say for the roof, the door, the windows, and then all of the paths that make up that window will be in that sublayer. So let's take a look at how to make layers and sublayers. If we want to make a new layer here, we come down to this icon here, the Create New Layer icon, and click, and that's going to give us a new layer. To name it, you double click and it's going to let you name it. So we're going to make a tree. We'll name this layer Tree. Now we can make sublayers within this layer, so we'll make one for the trunk of the tree and one for the leafy part of the tree. You want to make sure you have that layer selected. If you select on this one and make it, it's going to make a sublayer in the wrong layer. So select Tree, and then you want to come to this little icon here with the arrow, Create New Sublayer. If you click that, it's going to create a sublayer within this layer. So we can name this one Trunk, and we can create a new one, but you don't want to create it with Trunk selected. If we do that, it's going to create another sublayer under Trunk. So the leafy part is still within the tree, not within the trunk. So I'm going to just undo that with Control Z, make sure we have the tree layer selected, and click Create Sublayer. And then we'll double click on that, and we'll just call that leafy part. Alright, so now that we have our sublayers, we could create the paths within them. So let's start with the trunk. We're just going to come over here and create a quick trunk. Alright, so inside of our trunk sublayer, we have this rectangle path, and this is the actual path that we've created. And you'll want to name these paths as well. So I'm going to name this Main Trunk. Alright, so we can keep making paths within the trunk sublayer. Just make sure you have it selected. We're going to come and just put a little hole in this tree. Make it a little darker. And we can double click on that and call it Hole. And so these paths are all within the trunk sublayer. So if you want to select everything within the trunk sublayer, you can just come over and click that, and it's going to select the trunk and the hole in the tree that we just made. And those are all within the sublayer. Alright, now we're going to create the leafy part. So we'll just deselect our tree. We're going to click on the leafy part sublayer. And now we can just start creating pieces of the leaves. It's going to be a pretty rough tree, but you'll get the idea. Alright, so now we have this beautiful tree. We have all these leafy parts, all within this sublayer. So normally I want you to go in and name your paths, but if all of the paths are just the same thing and you have multiple ones, you can just leave those ones alone. But try to name as much as you can just for your own organization. Alright, we're going to minimize these and minimize our tree layer. Now if we wanted to select the entire tree, you just come over here and click that button, and we could select the entire thing at once. You can also change the arrangement of the layers and how they overlap each other. So right now we have the tree above the girl layer. So if we select the whole thing and move it over, it's going to be in front of her. We're going to cover this more in a tutorial later, but I just want to quickly go over how to arrange these. So right now it's over her, but if we take the layer, I'm going to deselect it for a second, make sure you select everything again, select the layer, and just drag it. You want to drag it till you see the line below. If you have it highlighted on girl layer, it'll drop it into her layer. I'm just going to undo that and select it and just drag it so you see that line, and it's going to drag it underneath her layer, and now she's over top of it. Alright, we're just going to move it back over here. You can also do this within the layer. So if you were to create your tree, but you accidentally had the trunk above the leaves, you can just select them and move them around that way. If you make some new paths and you accidentally make them in the wrong layer, you can take those and move them out of that layer and into the one you want. So for example, if we have the girl layer selected and we're trying to make apples for our tree, these are going to be in the wrong layer. So these are all in the girl layer. So you want to select all of these. You can select multiple layers, sublayers, or paths by holding down Shift and clicking all of them. So then you want to just grab those and drag them into your tree layer. And that's going to put them in here. But right now these paths are just in the main layer. So you want to grab them again, Shift Select, and just drag them and drop them under the leafy part. So now those are in there. And again, if you accidentally drop them below the leaves, you can just select them and rearrange them within the layer. So again, just remember that when you're making layers, you want to make layers for all of the main objects in your scene, and then sublayers for parts of that main object. You don't want to start making too many sublayers within sublayers, just because it can get confusing when you're looking for the objects and trying to select different objects, but sometimes it is necessary. For instance, with the girl layer here, her face is made up of the eyes, the mouth, the nose, and all of those have their own little individual pieces, so it's easier to make a sublayer like this within another sublayer. But when you start to make too many sublayers within each other, then you have to really start to dig to find your separate paths. If you want to make copies of your layer, so say we want to make multiple trees, you could always select the entire layer and just do a copy-paste to create a new tree, but that's going to paste it within the layer that we had selected. I'm just going to undo that, and if we select the tree layer and just drag it down to the new layer icon so you get that little plus sign, let go, it's going to make a tree copy layer, and then we can just move that and it'll give us a second tree. You can also delete any layers, sublayers, or paths just by selecting it and hitting this delete selection right here. And then, yeah, we can also go in and just delete certain sublayers or paths if we want. Alright, that's going to wrap up this tutorial on layers, sublayers, and paths, and how to organize everything.